Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Tuesday, May 16th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Indiana game is in 110 days. The game against Michigan in 194 days. We're going to continue our post-spring, pre-summer, off-season, whatever you want to call it, series, position by position on the Ohio State football team. Today we are headed back to the offensive side of the ball, and we're headed to the running back room, and that is a spot where there's no one really new in the room this year, but there are a lot of questions, there's a lot of talent, there's a lot of stuff to sort out. And just the person to help me sort all of that stuff out is Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Tony, this is maybe the deepest Ohio State running back room I can remember in a long time, but I say that about a group that did not have a 1,000-yard rusher last season. So kind of an unusual mixture of proven depth, but also not necessarily anyone who is head and shoulders above everyone else.
Yeah, a lot of proven depth, and they were all on the squad last year. And how thin did they get? You had to move Chip Trayanum over to running back because of how thin they got. So, we talk about how deep they are right now, and I think the fear and the paranoia that hit Ryan Day and Tony Alford has, it's one of these things where as long as we stay healthy, that goes out the window with the running backs that they've had because of the injury history for basically all of them. And maybe Dallin Hayden is the only guy who wasn't banged up last year, and he may have been banged up as well for as little as they used him in certain situations down the stretch. But it's a good number. It's there is there a number one? I think there's a 1A and a 1B, and then a 2A and a 2B and a 2C and a 2D maybe. The drop off isn't that bad because I think it's a pretty talented group.
Yeah, it is a pretty talented group. Let's start at the top, and I guess the question is who's at the top, because I started writing down the five guys just to put some stats behind them, and TreVeyon Henderson was the first name I wrote, but TreVeyon Henderson was far from the leading rusher last year. Mayan Williams had the most yards by like 250. He had more touchdowns than all the other running backs combined, had the most yards per carry. So, TreVeyon Henderson, I guess I still feel like is kind of the, 1A here in this group. But I think a lot of his lack of production last year had to do with health issues. And he did not play this spring. He was very limited this spring. But he also feels like he should be kind of back to 100% this fall. And if he is, then that really gives Ohio State a very valuable weapon sort of at the top of that depth chart.
Yeah, I think if you look back, TreVeyon Henderson was a top 5, top 8 Heisman contender going into last season based on his freshman season and coming back and playing with a starter and C.J. Stroud. And so there was a lot of attention, a lot of hype, perhaps some preseason All-American nods for him as well. So I think the season that he had is not what he wanted. He tried to gut it out and go through it, but the foot injury just kept slowing him down, literally, figuratively. And I think there's a lot that he wants to prove to people this year, prove to himself, and silence the doubters, that sort of thing. And I from everything we've heard, from everything Tony Alford has said, he's really attacked the winter and spring as best he could, trying to sneak into some drills and having to be told get out of here, things like that. So he really wants to get after it. I think those guys are proven enough. Is one of them J.K. Dobbins? I don't think so. I think TreVeyon Henderson at one point in his freshman year did look like a J.K. Dobbins type. Right now, I think those two guys, you give them I don't know if there's going to be much disparity between the two total carries between the two of them, as long as they stay relatively healthy, although relatively healthy for this group means you miss 2 games.
Yeah, and that was a remarkable thing last year. You look at how deep the running back room looked at the start of the year, and they lost Evan Pryor early, so you knew they were going to be a little bit short. And then Miyan Williams missed games, TreVeyon Henderson missed games. You got to the point where you're starting a true freshman in Dallin Hayden. He was basically carrying the mail against Maryland in that next to last game, because Chip Trayanum was also banged up, and then you get to the Michigan game, and all those guys are banged up, and Chip Trayanum was the one who was kind of the leading rusher in that game, and it's a converted linebacker. on a in a year when you thought you had incredible depth there. So yeah, you never quite know, and you'll go through those years. Ohio State kind of had one of those years at cornerback last year as well. So if they can keep these guys healthy, and they should all be healthy entering the summer, that really changes the picture there. Because Mayan Williams, when Mayan Williams was healthy last year, man, oh man, Mayan Williams was good. 825 yards, 6.4 yards per carry, 14 touchdowns. You look at him in that Indiana game. It's snowing. It's one of those games where this could be a game where you kind of screw around and it's close longer than it should be. And Mayan Williams was just dominant in that game. And then, of course, he got hurt and was just not quite right the rest of the year. If he's healthy, I think he gives them something that really, I don't know that any other back on this team really gives them, just in terms of in the mixture of the power to run inside, the speed to run outside. He'll give you a little bit of stuff out of the backfield in terms of catching the ball in the passing game. He is a really dynamic player that I think came out of high school and everyone kind of went, maybe he'll do, maybe he'll be something. And he has turned into such a dynamic player for them that if he's healthy this year, I think that maybe changes some things for this offense.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think he and TreVeyon Henderson are solid complements to each other, but they're it's a weird complement where Mayan Williams has the quickness and the ability to cut and make moves, but not necessarily the 4-4 guy that breaks it, whereas TreVeyon Henderson is the fast guy, but maybe is just better straight ahead, that sort of thing, where he's not the guy making all of these cuts and moves. Combined, they're tremendous, but Mayan Williams, he went into last year as the short yardage specialist as well. And when your short yardage specialist, your goal line specialist is averaging 6.5 yards per carry, that means they're doing a lot when they're not in those short yardage situations, when they're not inside the 5. Because a lot of times you have these guys that are the short yardage specialists, their averages are down because they only get to carry the ball in those situations. You give him the ball in any situation and he's going to make something happen with it, especially when he's healthy. And I think you could say that with anybody, but I think I trust him more than anybody else in that room to get out of the backfield, to make that first man miss, to get that extra yard. And I don't care if it's not going to go 70, although he's done it. He's done those things. So I think the guy that just, with a new quarterback and with an existing starter, the guy that keeps the chains moving, keeps you on schedule. If a 3 or 4 yard carry that should have been a 1 yard carry, that's what Ryan Day is looking for in those situations. He always wants a couple extra yards out of you, and I think they get that from Mayan Williams pretty regularly.
Yeah, and they got more, I think, maybe more and less out of Mayan Williams last year than they were expecting, because when he was on the field, it was more, and then when he was hurt, it was less. But I think they got a lot more than they were expecting last year out of Dallin Hayden. He came in as a true freshman and, a 4-star prospect, and not the 5-star superstar immediate impact guy that you necessarily thought you were getting with like a TreVeyon Henderson or, J.K. Dobbins back in the day, or Maurice Clarett way back in the day. That is not a spot where you typically see a true freshman, having a huge season, and especially not with a bunch of veterans ahead of him. But when he got his opportunity last year, he made the most of it. 553 yards rushing, 5.0 yards per carry, 5 touchdowns on the year. He looks like someone who could be on his way to big things, but I guess the question this year is how many carries are there going to be for him, because you have a couple talented guys ahead of him, and is Chip Trayanum ahead of him? Is Chip Trayanum even with him on the depth chart? What's going on with Evan Pryor? And we'll get to him in a minute. It feels like Dallin Hayden could be, legitimately, Dallin Hayden could be the next 1,000-yard runner on this team, but not this season.
Yeah, what would the odds have been last year? Say the odds for Dallin Hayden rushing for 500 yards have been like plus 2,000 or something like that. Just a big-time gamble, and the expectations were redshirt year, basically, because you've got so many guys. And yeah, maybe you get him in for more than 4 games if you want. But he was consistent and solid, and again, not necessarily a home run hitter, although he was doing really well early on, but keeps them on schedule, and was a guy that they could rely on. And then you build on that, and he gets more confident, and then he comes into this offseason with, working and wanting more carries and knowing what it takes and knowing what he didn't do last year that he could do this year. But I remember in the spring when I asked Tony Alford, have you talked to Dallin yet about, hey, you're probably not going to get 100 carries this year? And he's like, no. We're not even there yet. We're not discussing that. That's not something that I don't think you want to calm yourself down. Just like, I want you to you probably shouldn't expect a bunch of carries this year. Obviously, he wants his guys to be engaged and hungry, but I don't know. And barring, like, if everything goes as planned, how does he get 100 carries again this year?
It feels like that's almost impossible with as much as they are likely going to be throwing the ball. And, we've talked about the wide receiver core, we've talked about the tight ends, and you're going to want to throw to the running back, some out of the backfield. And there are only so many snaps you're going to have in a season. So if the two guys ahead of him are healthy, I don't know how you get the third guy to 100 carries. It just seems like that's just sort of statistically impossible. Just you don't have enough footballs, you don't have enough snaps to get all those guys there. The fourth guy I wanted to talk about was Chip Trayanum, and Chip Trayanum just sort of came out of nowhere. He had just the strangest season last year. He was moving over from linebacker to running back. He had obviously played running back at Arizona State before coming to Ohio State, so he wasn't completely new to it, but he also was not a running back at Ohio State. He didn't, he went through the spring as a linebacker at Ohio State, and then just sort of got moved over partway through the season when they sort of looked around the running back room and went, where is everybody? And he had 14 carries for 83 yards against Michigan, but that was it. One carry against Iowa for 9 yards the rest of the year. So what are we expecting out of Chip Trayanum this year?
It feels to me like, based on what we saw against Michigan, that they certainly trusted Chip more last year than Dallin Hayden, and I wonder if that trust has continued, and what they've seen from him has continued to make them like him more than Dallin, the experience. So I kind of view him as that number 3. He's got the I think he showed some good speed, and he's getting faster. The strength, the fact that running back came back to him relatively quickly, and we had heard the excitement about his kick return abilities, but what we saw from him last year at running back was good. I think this year, obviously, you would expect better. This is his senior season. Whether it's his last season or not, we will see. But I think for me right now, if I were to put them in a top 4 or whatever, I can't differentiate between TreVeyon Henderson and Mayan Williams, because whenever TreVeyon Henderson is healthy, it seems like he starts. So I would put those Mayan Williams and TreVeyon Henderson as 1. And then for me, I think I would put Chip Trayanum at 3 and then Dallin Hayden at 4. But again, I think there's some, it's kind of even to where maybe this opponent it's Dallin Hayden, maybe this opponent it's Chip Trayanum, but I see more carries this year for Chip Trayanum than Dallin Hayden.
Yeah, it really does feel like there is a 1A, 1B with Henderson and Williams, and then a 2A, 2B with Trayanum and Hayden, where you could tell me, either of those guys gets the most carries, either of those guys get the third most carries. I kind of believe it. It's such a deep room, but one without someone who's like clearly the alpha dog, that it's a very unusual mix there. And then the last thing you kind of got to throw in the mix is Evan Pryor, because Evan Pryor came in as a true freshman in 2021, looked very impressive, looked, young, like he needed to continue to develop, but comes out there last year before the season, gets hurt, and misses the whole year, misses all of spring ball as well. What are you getting out of Evan Pryor this year?
I wonder if we'll see maybe some of the Xavier Johnson type of stuff where he's in there on passing downs. Because I think what you need to do is you need to keep him engaged, and he's been working and sitting. He's played in 4 games in his first 2 years. He's going to be hungry to get out there. So I think if you can involve him in a passing game, and it doesn't necessarily even mean getting him the ball because he has to get open for that, but if he's out there playing as a receiver, as a running back, here and there, he's at least feeling like he's part of the situation. So I think that's key. And if he's making plays, then you get him even more involved. And I also feel like they want to see what they've got in him. There's been we've heard good things when he's healthy and practices and things like that. So at this point, this will be his third year. Let's see. Like, everybody's itching to see what Evan Pryor can do, and not just in garbage time like in 2021 as a true freshman when he got to play in 4 games, and here Evan Pryor run the ball up the middle. It's like, that's not fair to him. You got to get him doing what he does best, and I don't want to go to quote out in space type of stuff, but get him where he's at his best. And if that's between the tackles, if that's outside zone, if that's in the slot, whatever it is, he's a guy that can do some multiple things. They want you to have guys that do multiple things. Boom. Here's this guy that is ready for that.
Yeah, it does feel like he's in that unusual position where it feels like he's one of the young guys, and also he was in the same recruiting class as TreVeyon Henderson. So TreVeyon Henderson feels like the real veteran and one of the proven guys, and Evan Pryor feels like this young, unproven guy. It's like Jaden Ballard with Marvin Harrison. It's like they don't seem like they were in the same recruiting class, even though they were. Is this the year that Jaden Ballard gets his chance? Is this the year that Evan Pryor gets his chance? We'll all find out together this fall. But it should be, either way, that should be a very good and very deep unit for Tony Alford and Brian Hartline and Ryan Day and the rest of the Buckeyes in that running back room this fall. Should be a lot of potential highlight reel plays and games for that whole group. So we will be keeping an eye on that at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We'll be keeping an eye on a whole bunch of other stuff there as well. Kevin and Mark in the middle of their southern swing. We talked to Kevin on yesterday's show about some of the guys they've already seen. They saw Aaron Noland go up against Jaden Davis, future Ohio State quarterback. Aaron Noland against future Michigan quarterback Jaden Davis at one of the Elite 11 regionals over the weekend. Turns in a very interesting video there. I'm sure that's stuff that at least one or two fan bases might be interested in watching. You can find that at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle, as well as lots of reporting and insight and analysis on the huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com that is exclusive to our members. And if you're looking for something, looking for a site to sign up for, to start getting interested and start following this recruiting cycle, this which should be a pretty interesting Ohio State football season and much more, a great place to do that would be at BuckeyeHuddle.com. If your memberships coming up at your membership renewal date is coming up at another site, and you're thinking, maybe I should go, follow Kevin and Tony and Mark and Alex and Ross and Justin and Devin and Mikey and the whole rest of the gang. Well, we're all there at BuckeyeHuddle.com, waiting to welcome you in. If you want to give it a try it for a month. We have month-to-month options as well as annual memberships. So sign up today at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.